Alright, so first of all, I've got 2 videos coming up. I'm a bit behind because work has been stupid and I had a huge catastrophic leak in the bathroom of my house, which meant I had to tear everything out. The floors, shower, toilet, everything until I found it. I did, and now I've got to put it all back, and I've only got so much energy. The 2 videos I'm working on, I've got one on God of War. Yes, it is as good as everyone is saying. In fact, I think it might be a near perfect game. It's easily one of the top 5 of the generation, and as I write it up, I'm convincing myself it very well might be the greatest game ever made. The other video is about the importance of getting your difficulty right. In the background here, you'll see some interesting footage. I realized I had almost all the achievements on Titanfall 2, so I decided to play the campaign on Master. Spoiler for the video, it changes the game so much it becomes a completely different, much less fun game. Seemingly completely unrelated, but actually quite related, I continued playing the campaign of Destiny 2 for the 3rd time. I wanted to level up the Titan. Except, this time, I completed the first couple missions without using my gun, and then decided to do the whole thing with nothing other than melee. I had to use my gun for one enemy before stopping on the 3rd mission of IO so that I could play God of War. Other than one floating Vex Hydra that I couldn't punch without falling, I punched every other enemy to death during the campaign. No grenades, no supers, no guns. One might say a shooter campaign that could be mostly beat by an average player without shooting isn't challenging enough, so tune in for that. But today we're going to do one of my easy to produce reaction videos because I have something to say about Bungie's powwow with YouTube and Twitch stars. So if you're a fan of the game, you already know this, but for those who aren't, the last few days have seen a bunch of videos about Bungie flying out a whole bunch of big name Destiny peeps and actually listening to them about the state of the game. Almost all of these videos are relatively positive. Now, I'm not saying that to throw shade. In fact, I am completely willing to believe that Bungie is now sincere about fixing this mess and has finally realized they need to include the people who play the game. Let's leave aside that many of the problems with Destiny 2 are a direct result of a shitty business model and acknowledge that the game is probably going to get better for this whole exercise. The changes made so far have been too slow and too safe, but they have all been for the better at least, and I do believe they finally realize they are in deep shit and need to start taking some risks to win players back. I expect Warmind to be disappointing, but as angry as I seemed in my last video, I get it. The mistakes that doomed Destiny 2 were made well over a year ago. Deciding to do a sequel instead of a huge expansion was a nearly mortal blow, and then rebooting that project with only 16 months to go, the game was doomed. These DLCs were already nearly complete the day Destiny 2 launched, as we all know. I understand we can't have things fixed immediately. I get it, I do. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. What I actually want to talk about is something about the powwow that's been mentioned by everyone in attendance, even bemoaned, but hasn't got nearly enough attention, in my opinion. All of the people who were invited to Bungie for what was by all reports a frank, honest, and productive discussion about Destiny 2's past and future were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. So while all those videos have been fairly positive, they've also been incredibly vague. Videos have had to talk about interesting and honest discussions and important and welcome changes by dancing around the topics. This insistence by Bungie on making people sign blanket non-disclosure agreements is disgusting, bullying, absurd, and exactly the kind of thinking and business practices that have gotten Bungie in this mess in the first place. Bungie is not making nuclear weapons. To be as fair as possible, I'm willing to say that if Bungie wanted NDAs signed stipulating that the people they invited out could not divulge any proprietary information about the engine or specific things about Destiny 3, fine. But Datto's video on this is a perfect example of why it pisses me off so much. Go watch that if you haven't. You'll see what I mean. Datto makes clear he asked many of the questions that all of us want answered. What was the original design decision that led us here? Why is the game so casually focused? What are the numbers that justify designing a game in this manner? Now, listen, the truth is we probably all know the answer to these questions. Or at least we have good reason to believe that we are right when we assume that Bungie wanted to make absolutely certain they got a Metacritic rating in the high 80s at least, because A, that translates to huge sales increases, and B, many developers have bonuses tied to Metacritic scores. But still, I want to hear Bungie explain that stuff to me. Not Datto, Bungie. What's the downside to actual honesty and transparency here? The problems with Destiny 2 and Bungie have been endlessly analyzed and dissected. The reasons for the mistakes have been pretty much figured out. I'm not asking for people to be thrown under the bus, but I am asking for honesty and transparency. Bungie is absolutely terrible at communicating with its customers, and yes, it is customers. I am not a member of your community. I am not a fan. I am a customer. A customer who was sold something that is pretty crappy and half-assed and a minimally viable product. This has led to resentment on my part. That Datto video was, for me, infuriating. Listen, while I am pleased that the developers and staff at Bungie let them ask tough questions and gave them honest, transparent answers, I am offended that I can't hear those answers for myself, because this serves no purpose for Bungie. They have a really nasty habit of thinking they're the smartest people in the room. It's why, instead of matchmaking, you've got guided games. It's why, instead of just admitting that their insistence on balancing PvP and PvE together was a total disaster, as soon as that became clear, they've wasted years and untold resources slowly ending up where they are, with a still unbalanced meta and a stale, boring PvE weapon system. Instead of balancing those modes separately, like every other game ever, they had decided they had to reinvent the wheel, certain of their own genius, and took away the ability to use a sniper and a rocket launcher, and gave you your super and grenades way less often. I mean, this problem was obvious from the very beginning, and it became super obvious right around the time the original auto rifle nerf to rein in Shuros regime in PvP made all auto rifles utterly useless in the rest of the game. The only people still even remotely interested in this disaster are the people who have stuck by this game, because even after 4 years, the potential of what it could be is tantalizing. And you owe those people answers, Bungie. The only possible reason to not let me hear these answers is because Bungie still wants to control a narrative they never had control of to begin with. And all of the problems with the game go back to this impulse that they have. My only other video that's gotten some views was the one where I begged Bungie to stop telling people how they must play the game. I am a musician and a writer, okay? Once I write a song and record it, I lose control of that song. I may have had an idea of what I want people to think or feel when they hear that song, but I have no control over that. The song belongs to the person who hears it as much as it belongs to me. Bungie needs to realize that insisting you are right is a very annoying habit. One of the most annoying habits a person or company can have. I am just baffled at this. I'm shocked that Bungie could sit down and decide their game is in such a sorry state they need to bring dozens of people across the country and have them tell them how to fix it and hopefully generate some good PR, but in that same meeting decided they were going to threaten to sue these people for $5 million if anything other than exactly what Bungie wanted people to hear leaked out. It's grotesque, it's unethical, and worst of all, it's proof they still don't get it. The root of your problems, Bungie, are directly tied to whoever came up with this idea. The idea that at all costs, you must control what people think and feel. And it shows you're still more concerned with protecting yourself from embarrassment or controlling your message, a message almost nobody gives a shit about anymore, by the way, than you are concerned with fixing the game. And even more than that, Bungie, I deserve answers to my questions. I deserve it because, again, I'm not a part of your community. I'm not an influencer or a content creator. I deserve it because I'm something more important than that. You know what I am? I am a customer. That's what I am. A customer who was sold something so much less than what you promised. Someone who's being told to wait while you take a full year to sell me back the game that I still have installed. The game I bought 4 years ago. I know you think you have to protect the brand, but here's the thing. In politics, in business, in a marriage, transparency is never the wrong answer. Ever. People are remarkably, ridiculously forgiving. Because most people, when confronted with the honest, human mistakes of another, see themselves in that mistake, and then they feel empathy. But when the other person obscures and spins and refuses to admit their mistakes in plain, honest language, then they get frustrated and lose trust. And lost trust is almost impossible to get back. We go through life depending on the honesty of others. And the one thing people are not forgiving about is being lied to or spun, because it calls the entire social contract into question. There is one other hugely important and troubling problem with this whole sad business, and it's that how can I possibly trust and believe you've realized your mistakes if you won't acknowledge and explain those mistakes back to me? How can I trust this process? I'm supposed to take vague assurances from these YouTube channels, but you won't even let these people relate what was asked and answered? It's just fucking gross, Bungie. And bullying. And short-sighted, and it leaves me extremely skeptical that you've learned any damn thing at all. I need to hear you admit your mistake. The first video I made that got any views at all was basically my Destiny 2 review, which I called Destiny 2 is a bad Destiny game. Someone apparently posted it on Reddit, and I got like 1,000 views and over 100 subscribers in one evening, which for me was fucking awesome. I was shocked. Most of the comments were really supportive, but 2 people posted comments saying they could barely watch it because of the music. My first reaction was to get defensive. Those longer analysis videos are pretty damn time consuming to make. An hour of video takes easily 15 to 20 hours to produce when you add everything up, and nobody likes being criticized. So I quickly responded and said I didn't think there was anything I could do about whether or not the music was to their liking. But then I thought for a while, and then I rewatched the video. And finally, I went back and I responded again, and I told those 2 people they were right, because they were. As much time as I'd put into the writing and editing, I'd put very little time or effort into really making sure the music was looped well and well mixed. I admitted it. The music I was using was wrong and was kind of lazily implemented. And then I spent time really trying to make better music loops and switch it up by section so that the music at least somewhat matched the tone of the section and that no loop played for more than a few minutes at a time. When I first started playing in bands, I was always ready to admit that there was room to improve in live shows and on record. And even after I got pretty damn good at music, I was aware that I could not control what others thought of it beyond simply and honestly doing everything in my power to do the best I could with the resources I had. I don't think Destiny or Destiny 2 have honestly been the best Bungie could do. In fact, I am positive of that. There is no fucking way anybody can convince me that the Curse of Osiris was the best Bungie could do. And there's no way you can convince me that Bungie believes the Curse of Osiris was the best they could do. But Bungie refuses to admit that. They refuse to own up to what is patently and frustratingly obvious, and they refuse to stop trying to control the message. Bungie, please, take a lesson. Stop trying to control what you cannot. You cannot control the message. You cannot control what people think of the game you've made. You cannot control the way they want to engage with it. You can only control making a better game. Plainly and honestly admit that to me. Admit the mistakes. Own them. Explain them. And then get back to doing the best you can to ensure that none of us ever have cause to feel this way again. Alright. Bye.